And we're back. Very many thanks for choosing to stay with us. It feels absolutely great to be in your company. And in case you're just joining us, welcome to Kenya's Gold, where the focus of the day is on fish farming in Kenya. And we're just from watching a feature from a farmer who's using recycling and innovation in their practice. And they're still doing absolutely well in that sector. But for now, it's time for the gold conversation. And we want to learn a lot more on what we can do to increase the production when it comes to tilapia and catfish farming. And to educate us about that and more, we do have the distinct pleasure of being joined by Racha Sasso, who is an aquaculture specialist. Very many thanks for making time to be with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Yeah. So we're just going to jump straight into the conversation where we're talking about aquaculture and also capture fisheries, and also the fact that over the last 10 years, there has been a significant drop in the production from capture fisheries. Maybe you can talk to us about what is leading to that drop, and for the person who's watching right now and still needs a bit of explanation on what we're talking about when it comes to aquaculture and capture fisheries, you can explain that to them.
Okay, perfect. Yes. So first of all, thank you for having me on the show. I'm very passionate about aquaculture and fisheries and food security within the region. So I'll start with, let's say, making the distinction what aquaculture is and what fisheries is.
Right.
Aquaculture, let's say, is the process of farming fish from hatch to harvest. So you do it in a closed system, and you also supply them with inputs. Capture fisheries, on the other hand, is, let's say, the more traditional way of getting fish. It's when you go out into the ocean. It's when you go out onto Lake Victoria. You have your boats, you have your nets. You go out into the water and you fish out your fish. And so that's, let's say, the main distinction between what aquaculture and what capture fisheries is. You're 100% correct when you say there has been a decline. There's been a very, very big decline. Every time I go to Lake Victoria, or if I go to the coast and I speak to, let's say, these artisanal fishermen, they always tell me that 10 years ago or 20 years ago, when they went out into the lake, they were able to spend maybe 2 hours, come back with 20 kgs or 30 kgs of fish. Now they can go spend 8 hours on the water, come back with less than 5 kgs.
Right.
So there's like several reasons for that. One of them, which is a big one, is, let's say, climate change. It's leading to increase in water temperatures. It's affecting algal blooms. It's affecting the acidification of the water without going into too much detail. But also there's been overfishing. There's been a lot of human intervention in the oceans and in the lakes, which has led to a lot of overfishing, which has caused the decline.
All right. Yeah. So when you talk about aquaculture being the farmed fish, we see mostly we have the tilapia. But what else can do best in that space?
Yeah. So tilapia at the moment in Kenya, I would say, is 95% of production. And I think that is, let's say, being driven a lot by our history of liking tilapia, being used to tilapia coming out of Lake Victoria. So it's really consumer driven. I think, let's say, catfish has a big potential. So catfish is being farmed in other regions across Africa. So Nigeria is farming a lot of catfish. The DRC has a very big taste for catfish.
Is that in comparison to how tilapia is being done in those countries?
So in Nigeria, 95% of production is catfish. So it's almost the equivalent of tilapia.
Right.
So it's really driven by consumer preference. So in Kenya, what we are seeing now is that people are beginning to try catfish more and more and are beginning to enjoy it. So I think catfish is a very interesting one to continue farming because it's also very climate resilient. It's a very tough, like I think we saw it in the previous show. It's very tough. It's an air breather, so it can breathe oxygen from its lungs. It can survive, let's say, poor quality. It can survive a big range of temperature changes. So it's a very resilient, a very strong fish to farm. Right. It also grows very, very fast. So I think catfish, let's say, is the next one. But I think it's also important to look at the regions which you're farming. So for example, in the coast, shrimp is ideal to farm, yet it's being farmed in very, very small quantities. So I think we also need to focus on, introducing new species like shrimp, etc.
All right. Yeah. Now, when we're talking about climate change, which is one of the major issues that people in the fish farming sector are facing, as you talk to farmers, what intervention measures are we giving them so that we know how to deal with the situation that is climate change?
So when it comes to climate change, let's say it's affecting fish farmers in many different ways. Right. Right now, for example, you're having flooding in Homa Bay, you're having flooding in regions like Kakamega. In the previous years, you also had drought, but the biggest, let's say, effect of climate change is happening on the cost of inputs. It's happening on the cost of feed. And feed, let's say, it covers 70% of operational costs.
Right.
So when you have drought, when you have climate change issues, the cost of raw materials increases, and that translates onto the cost of feed. So that is the biggest effect it is having on the farmers. So the biggest intervention, let's say I would tell fish farmers, is learn how to feed your fish properly. Don't overfeed them, don't underfeed them. Feed them the exact amount. So when I say that, what I mean is that fish farmers need good training, they need good skills, they need technical knowledge, technical know-how, upskilling. So that's what I would say is, let's say, the biggest intervention is that we need to teach the farmers very good management practices so that they're able to manage and adapt to climate change.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, you've also mentioned something important on the fact that catfish has a lot of potential, and you've broken down some of the advantages you can get from growing catfish.
Yeah.
And clearly, there is a lot of benefits, but not so very many farmers are doing it.
Yeah.
So what is the problem? Why is there such a big knowledge gap, and what can we do to fill it?
Yeah. So I think, let's say, a lot of it is driven by historical preference or historical knowledge that, you know, your next door neighbor is farming tilapia, he'll teach me how to farm tilapia. So I think that's the biggest reason, but also it's driven by consumer preference, in which there's no, let's say, formal market for catfish the same way there is for tilapia. So I think we need to improve market access for the existing catfish farmers, help them sell their product. Therefore, we'll be able to, let's say, give more incentives to other farmers entering the catfish.
Right.
But there's also lots of programs happening now to really promote catfish farming.
Right.
So I think that's where we need to focus. It's really on the upskilling and teaching farmers how to farm catfish and how it's different from farming tilapia.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, there was an initiative that the government had in the 1960s that was Eat More Fish campaign. And it led to so very many people, even in the rural areas, getting into fish farming with the tilapia. Do you think it's time that we went back to such campaigns and focus more on catfish farming? Is that something that is doable in this era?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's something that's absolutely necessary. I think the government right now is really promoting aquaculture. We've seen them do a lot in Kakamega, in Homa Bay, etc. So I think now what needs to happen is that we need to really focus. So focus our intentions. Instead of saying we want to increase aquaculture production, really be specific. We want to focus and say we want to increase catfish production. We want to increase it by this much. So absolutely, I think there is very much a need, and I think it's very much possible.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, speaking about being specific, there is also the conversation on modern technology that is required if the aquaculture space is supposed to transform. If we are to talk about that space of modern technology, given that the feature that we're just from watching is from a farmer who's recycling, all right, and that's the best of their ability. But if we move to modern technology that we need to uptake, what are those technologies? What do we need to move to very quickly? There's so many technologies, but let's say for me, when I say that the aquaculture industry is going to increase, I see it increasing really in intensification and commercialization of the smallholder farmers, right? There are so many smallholder fish farmers. We need to really help them grow quickly. So for me, I think the best, let's say, technology that they can adapt is recording data in a digital format. That's so important. You need to record your data. You need to understand all your historic data. You need to know exactly what is happening on your farm. And there are very good apps already out there that that exist. You know, Aquaculture is one of those apps. So I would say, let's say, the best modern technology that fish farmers can adapt quickly is start recording your data in a digital format. All right. Now, very quickly, as we wind up this session, maybe you can tell us which system we're seeing a lot more when it comes to aquaculture in Kenya, from semi-intensive, intensive, and extensive system. Which one are you seeing most popularly used by our farmers here?
I would say intensive systems. So intensive, what it means, the difference between intensive and extensive, it's the stocking density. It's how much fish you are actually stocking. I would say intensive systems are what is resulting in the highest production. And in intensive systems, you can have cage culture, you can also have pond culture. And so this is when you really move towards commercialization and you start producing a lot of fish in a small space. So what that leads is to really selling a lot of fish and making a lot of revenue, and therefore making a lot of money and profit.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much,
Yeah.
Racha, for talking to us.
You're
We're
welcome.
taking a break, but when you come back, please tell me which fish do you like, either baked or boiled, coconut. What's your favorite? Because I want you to taste later.
I am a fan of dry fried tilapia.
We have it right here on the show, and we will make you taste when we come back. And also we'll have a conversation with our chef of the day, who'll talk to us about the demand of fish in the restaurants. That and a lot more when we come back from the short commercial break.